Morning, good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for being here. We're going to begin our show this morning on your money. The price we pay for everyday goods could go up as a potential trade war looms. Overnight, the president's long-touted tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports went into effect. The White House slapped 25% on goods from Mexico and Canada, while Canada also saw a 10% duty levied on its energy. China also received an additional 10% tariff on its goods.
Beijing is retaliating with additional tariffs of up to 15% on some U.S. goods. That's going to begin March 10th. China is also restricting exports to 15 U.S. companies. Canada also hitting back with tariffs on more than $100 billion of American goods, while Mexico is expected to announce retaliatory measures later today. The start of a potential trade war is spooking global markets. U.S. stocks closed sharply lower yesterday. And this morning, European and Asian markets are also trading down. Speaking on Monday, the president defended his decision to impose tariffs. He says it's necessary to tackle drug trafficking.
It's going to be very costly for people to take advantage of this country. They can't come in and steal our money and steal our jobs and take our factories and take our businesses and expect not to be punished. And they're being punished by tariffs. It's a very powerful weapon.
In a few moments, we'll hear from our international correspondent in Beijing, Janice Mackey-Freyer. First, let's bring in NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung and Investopedia's editor-in-chief Caleb Silver. Good morning to both of you. We call you our economic dream team. This could be a nightmare for some folks today. Brian, we'll start with you. Walk us through these tariffs and what sectors the retaliatory measures and the tariffs could be impacted.
Yeah, and the reason why we're talking about this is because if tariffs had to get paid for by the companies here in the United States that now have to pay 25% more to bring things in from our neighbors to the north and to the south, well, then do they pass on those costs to the customer in the form of a higher price as well? That's what a lot of producers, a lot of companies have been telling us. Yes, we're going to have to pass that on to people in the form of a higher price tag. Now, when it comes to the items that will be impacted by these 25% tariffs, and by the way, also by that 10% additional tariff on China, we're thinking about products like delivery trucks, automotives. That's a major part of the industry between our neighbors to the north and south, getting car parts from Mexico, assembly in Canada, bringing it back into the United States. But I want to point out produce is a big one as well. We bring in a lot of fruits and vegetables from Mexico, and we also bring in potatoes from our neighbors to the north. So again, this is a very big, wide-ranging, overarching type of tariff that we can only begin to feel the impact of because President Trump had promised on the campaign trail even more tariffs down the line. When we talk about China, he had promised something like 60%. So when you think about the 10% last month, another 10% now, this is really just the beginning, guys.
Caleb, we heard a little bit about how produce being more expensive, that price being passed on to the consumer. How soon could a consumer feel this?
Yeah, things like produce, which are kind of immediate delivery or just take a few days, you'll feel that almost immediately. When you're talking about things like delivery trucks and autos, that takes a little bit longer. But there's also things like smartphones, refined and crude petroleum. We still import a lot of that, especially from Canada. We'll feel those prices immediately. But businesses are already feeling that because they've been preparing for this, trying to either get enough inventory in ahead of this or try to hedge their spending going forward. So you're feeling an economic slowdown or the threat of an economic slowdown, and that's the immediate impact of tariffs right now.
Brian, we talked about some of the negative impacts. What could be some of the positive impacts of all this?
Well, I mean, even Peter Navarro, who is the trade advisor to President Trump, has said this, at least these 25% tariffs and this 10% on China, is not a trade war. It is a drug war. They want fentanyl security to stop the flow of drugs into the United States. So it's really getting concessions on that front, which the Trump administration tried to kind of herald after the staving off of these tariffs about 4 weeks ago when there were some concessions from both Canada and Mexico, not necessarily with China. But that's one potential benefit of this. But the other potential benefit is the reshoring of companies broadly. Again, that's kind of a bigger story when it comes to these reciprocal tariffs, which I have to remind you is going to be coming up on April 2nd. So I imagine we'll be having to come back on set then. But again, the point for that is to try to bring companies back into the United States that have been manufacturing abroad. During Trump's first term, it did have the effect in some cases of having companies build manufacturing sites in the United States. And you think about some recent examples of announcements, Apple announcing a $500 billion investment into the United States, some arguments as to whether or not they were already going to do that investment. But nonetheless, you have these large companies making these splashy announcements of investments of trying to bring production here into the United States, which could be a benefit.
Caleb, Brian had mentioned how the markets seem to be spooked by this. What are we anticipating when they open open this morning? And how is our economy's resilience right now in terms of avoiding a recession?
Yeah, you're hearing the drumbeat get louder about a recession because we're seeing signs of economic slowdowns. The manufacturing index declined in February. The prices paid by businesses to import goods, that rose. GDP forecast, gross domestic product, that's our spending, that is down 2.8% for this quarter already. So you're feeling that slowdown, and the stock market is off about 5% since President Trump really seriously said on February 19th, we're not stopping, we're going forward with these tariffs. Stock market doesn't like uncertainty. This is a lot of uncertainty. It's only going to get worse.
All right, Brian Caleb, thank you for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
Well, for more on the impact of Trump's tariffs on China, let's bring in NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer. She joins us from Beijing. Janice, good morning. So walk us through where things stand right now between the U.S. and China as the tariffs take effect. What message are these retaliatory tariffs sending?
Well, China didn't waste any time in retaliating against the new U.S. tariffs, announcing their own broad tariffs primarily on American food, and then telling 15 U.S. companies that they can effectively no longer do business here without special permission. Now, the White House says it's about fentanyl, accusing China of doing too little, but that's something Chinese officials take great exception to, pointing to counter-narcotics cooperation that they've had with U.S. officials. Beijing is also warning the U.S. about using tariffs as a national security tool. And they say the Trump administration just doesn't appear to know what it wants from China right now. So the message from the leadership here appears to be sending is that unilateral tariffs don't work. And ultimately, it's going to be U.S. businesses and consumers who will pay the price.
Yeah, and Janice, that's what I want to ask you about. All this escalation, what will the impact be on U.S. farmers, on U.S. consumers?
Well, it is a big hit for American farmers, especially in the Midwest, who export a lot to China. It's the largest food importer in the world. So chicken, wheat, corn, cotton, all subject to a 15% tariff, 10% on sorghum, soybeans, pork, beef, fruits, vegetables, dairy, aquatic products. These levies will all take effect on March 10th. So that alone signals that Beijing is wanting to have some time and maybe some room for negotiation before the tariffs take hold. But there has been no communication, open communication between the two sides since President Trump announced tariffs last month. And for the businesses that have been added to this unreliable entities list, companies like Skydio, it's the drone maker that supplies the U.S. military, they're going to have to get special permission to get any Chinese-made components. And again, the White House says it's about fentanyl, but China is saying that fentanyl is a U.S. problem that the U.S. needs to solve. And the foreign ministry here has called the tariffs blackmail and hinted that it might either curtail or even cut off counter-narcotics cooperation. And that's happened before, so there is precedent for that.
Janice, China's leaders are expected to have their biggest political meeting of the year. It's later this week, right as this trade battle starts to heat up. What can we expect?
Well, this is the big annual political get-together for Xi Jinping and China's top leadership. Everything is predetermined, true. The premier, though, is expected to present his work report, which may reveal where the government sees the economy right now. There's been a huge push here recently on China taking the lead on technology, on AI, deep-seek, humanoid robots. There was a video that they released today promoting this big meeting, all with robots and drones and robotic dogs, and it's going viral on Chinese social media here. What they're trying to do is send a message to Chinese consumers about where the economy stands right now. Consumption still remains weak, but China's leadership is wanting to show that it is this source of stability in a world that is obviously very chaotic right now. Joe and Savannah.
All right, Janice, thank you very much.
President Trump is set to address a joint session of Congress tonight after a whirlwind 43 days in office.
While not technically a State of the Union, the speech is an opportunity for the president to tout his efforts to deliver on campaign promises and lay out his plans for the future. It's also a chance to try to control the narrative as he faces growing pushback over the mass firing of government workers and uncertainty over the effect of these tariffs. Yesterday, President Trump hyped up his address on social media, writing, quote, "Tomorrow night will be big. I will tell it like it is."
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist. So, Aaron, we know President Trump does have a tendency to go off script. What is the White House saying about what he is expected to focus on in this speech tonight?
Well, Joe and Savannah, we're told that we should expect a lot of surprises and made-for-TV moments during this speech later on tonight. Administration officials have told our team that the president will highlight what he sees as his successes in this early part of his second term now. And, of course, a lot of these big things we've already been able to see ourselves as they've been happening. He's likely going to talk about his immigration efforts to try to stop illegal border crossings, to ramp up mass deportations around the country. I think we can expect to hear about the how and why of his erasure of diversity and equity programs and personnel from the federal government. Of course, we know that the tariffs against Mexico and China, as you've been talking about, went into effect overnight against Canada as well. So we'll be listening to see what all he has to say about that. And of course, as you noted, the big topic is going to be Elon Musk and how he has really just rocked the federal government with these massive spending cuts and these mass firings we've been watching. At the same time, we also know the president himself signaled yesterday afternoon that we will likely hear more about the minerals deal with Ukraine. He was asked whether that deal was dead, and he responded that, I'll let you know tomorrow night, he said. And he said, I don't think so. So we'll be listening to see what all he has to say about these really big issues that a lot of Americans are caring about right now, Joe and Savannah. And we'll be looking to see as well who he and the First Lady have in the First Lady's box up in the balcony in the House chamber tonight.
Yeah, Aaron, these moments are always kind of this spectacle, like you mentioned, who's in the audience, obviously, for the president. What do we know about the guest lawmakers are inviting as well to watch the address inside the House chamber?
Yeah, the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer of New York, has told Democrats that they should bring guests who we've been told have suffered because of the Trump administration's new policies as they've been coming into effect here. So I think you can expect to see some fired federal workers in the gallery tonight. You can expect to see, we're told Chuck Schumer plans to bring 2 Medicaid recipients and potentially a child who has a neuromuscular disorder who's benefited from some of the work that's happening at the National Institutes of Health, which we know has seen some funding cuts. We also expect, as I said, the president and First Lady to have some guests in the box as well. We're told by a White House official that Elon Musk will be in the chamber for the president's speech tonight as well. So those are some of the faces I think you can look for, among many others, very likely through the course of the speech.
So, Aaron, for Democrats, beyond who they have in the audience, they will have a chance to directly respond to the president's address. They have chosen Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin. She won a state that then Vice President Kamala Harris lost last November. Why are they picking her to deliver the party's rebuttal?
Yeah, Alyssa Slotkin, a freshman member of the Senate, won a big race in Michigan, as you said. The president's opposing party typically chooses to have someone do the response, someone who is considered a rising political star in the party, to talk about the opposing party's priorities. And so we'll hear that from her tonight. She, as I said, won this really competitive Senate seat, an open seat in Michigan back in November. And we're told that her speech will lean into her background as a former CIA analyst. That's according to a source familiar with the planning here. So you can expect her speech to really use that lens to talk about what we saw on Friday in the Oval Office, this real breakdown between President Trump, Vice President Vance, and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And of course, we're told as well that she will highlight what Democrats see as their priorities, a proactive economic message that they want to get out there to talk about what Democrats will be doing and what they want to be doing over the next year and leading right into the midterm elections, Joe and Savannah.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, for more analysis, let's bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter John Allen. John, good morning. So tonight's address, it comes on the heels. We've got a new poll, actually. This is from NPR, PBS, and Marist. It shows that President Trump, he's got a 45% approval rating. The poll also looked at voters' opinions on things like the overall State of the Union. What are your big takeaways from the results?
Well, actually, Savannah and Joe, the approval rating there is higher than it was when Donald Trump left office in January of 2021. So, I think it would be fair to judge that he is somewhere between, how the public felt about him when he took office this time, which was a little higher. He had majority approval. when he took office this time and where he was when he left last time. And the conclusion I draw from that is that a lot of the stuff that he's been doing in office so far is controversial and has cost him a little bit of public support. He's going to try to rally the American public tonight in his speech before a joint session of Congress. And, we'll see if people actually, go with him. But, again, that you're seeing up there right now the numbers on whether the country is headed in the right direction. 45% say yes, 54% no. The context around that is so many more people said the country was headed in the wrong direction before the November election.
So, John, of course, with the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution, President Trump can't run for election again, but a lot of other Republicans will be running again, some next year. So when they look at numbers that are underwater, how concerned do you think congressional Republicans, congressional senators are with just 6 weeks into the term? And is the Trump administration worried at all about the numbers?
Yeah, I think, number one, in terms of members of Congress, if you are up for re-election, which is all of the House members and, a third of the Senate members every 2 years, if you're up for re-election and you live in a district or a state where there is some competition, you should be concerned. In part, that's the historical context of, presidents tending to lose a chamber and certainly a lot of seats in their first midterm election after taking office. And part of that is that Donald Trump is moving things and moving fast and breaking things in the presidency. And, there are a lot of people that are going to have to adjust to that, whether you're talking about fired federal workers or you're talking about the people who receive benefits from the federal government who will see some of that work slowed down. So, Republicans are worried about it. I'm not sure it's going to change their behavior.
John, Democrats have been under pressure ever since losing the election in a pretty big way to try to fix their messaging, fix the party. They're being urged now to stand up against the new administration. Is tonight a moment for them to try to reclaim the narrative? Do you expect them to try to use it in that way?
I don't think it's a time for them to reclaim the narrative, at least not, within the president's speech. We've seen members of Congress try to do that before. To try to counter a president standing before a joint session of Congress. It's one of the most powerful images that any president can possibly have. I don't think it works particularly well to try to interrupt him. We've seen that effort before. We've seen Republicans do it. We've seen Democrats do it. So I think this is a moment, perhaps afterward for Democrats to go after President Trump. But I would simply say this. The Democratic Party for the last almost decade has basically become an anti-Trump coalition of longtime Democrats plus disaffected Republicans. And what they have not done is really focused on and concentrated on creating their own message, creating their own sort of party identity outside of being against Trump. And I think until they do that, they're going to have some difficulties.
John, we talk about the tensions right now in Washington and how in recent, whether it was a State of the Union or a joint session of Congress, we've seen people shout things, something that was unimaginable 20 years ago. Just describe the mood in Washington right now. How tense are things, and could that play out in some form tonight?
It's pretty tense, and it could play out in some form. I don't think the congressional leaders, the Democratic leaders in the House and Senate will want to see that happen, but it is very difficult to control a couple hundred members of your party, particularly when they don't know what the president's going to say, particularly when they're competing against each other for fundraising dollars and to become, to elevate themselves in the mind of the activists and the donors in their party. So, anything could happen. Ever since Joe Wilson stood up and yelled, "You lie," at President Barack Obama during a speech on Obamacare, I guess about 15 years ago or so now, no holds have been barred.
Yeah, the rules change with that. All right, John, thank you so much. And you can tune in to watch President Trump's joint address to Congress. That is happening right here tonight on NBC News Now. We'll be carrying his speech live, 8 o'clock Eastern.
Well, there is new fallout from the Trump administration's efforts to cut federal spending. This morning, Democrats are warning that even social safety net programs face the risk of being cut after Elon Musk labeled Social Security a Ponzi scheme. NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has the latest.
There seems to be very little slowing Elon Musk down in his quest to reduce the size of the federal bureaucracy. But now he's run into one issue that Democrats are willing to fight for, the future of Social Security. Democrats are pushing back on Elon Musk's effort to slash the size of the federal bureaucracy. And now zeroing in on his comments about Social Security's finances.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
The richest man in the world is telling Americans that earned benefits that they depend on and they paid into are a scam. They are not a scam, and Americans know it.
Social Security currently pays out more money to recipients than it takes in taxes. The Social Security Administration announcing it will cut costs by cutting 7,000 jobs, saying they're focusing on employees who do not directly provide mission-critical services. President Trump has pledged there will be no cuts to Social Security benefits. Meanwhile, DOJ's next target for spending cuts, the Pentagon's budget, which President Trump says he asked Musk to go through.
Check out the Pentagon, which is the military, and, sadly, you'll find some things that are pretty bad.
Musk touting the cuts so far.
It's a target-rich environment for saving money. It's not like if it was a very well-run ship.
And Musk saying DOJ is following the lead of the independent watchdog, the GAO, which estimates the federal government loses between $233 to $521 billion annually to fraud. But new pushback.
If you're rude, which you're being, I'm going to leave.
Kansas Republican Senator Roger Marshall forced to leave a town hall early to avoid a hostile crowd. President Trump calling the protesters, without evidence, paid troublemakers.
We don't need paid protesters, bro. The American people are with us.
The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth informing all civilian DoD employees that they must respond to Musk's email asking for a list of accomplishments for the week.
Thank you, Ryan. A dangerous storm system is moving across the U.S., threatening to bring high winds and possible tornadoes to the southern and eastern parts of the country. Now officials in New Orleans are scrambling to adjust today's Mardi Gras celebrations to try and keep revelers safe. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the very latest.
This morning, a major storm system barreling towards the south, whipping up everything from snow, rain, and heavy winds in the middle of the country to dust storms in the southwest. Now, millions under warnings for severe storms and even more dangerous winds, including New Orleans, bracing for wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour on Mardi Gras.
The national weather forecast turns from a watch for severe wind to a warning. I will cancel the parades at that point, no matter what time that is.
The severe weather threat prompting the city to cancel some celebrations and condense others. Today's two big parades are starting earlier. Their lineups and routes cut short. All of it in hopes of getting the party in before the bad weather arrives.
We're from New Orleans, so we outside anyway. It don't even matter. We still outside.
So rain or shine?
Rain or shine.
You're going to be partying.
We outside.
This was already shaping up to be an unusual Mardi Gras. Just over 2 months after the deadly Bourbon Street terror attack, security is at an all-time high. And some events like today's planned Rex Parade are paying tribute to the 14 innocent lives lost. Still, massive, energetic crowds have been lining the streets of New Orleans.
We want to hold that tradition up. We want to make it absolutely as best and as much fun for the people of New Orleans as possible and our visitors.
The community determined to celebrate no matter the weather.
Thank you, Jesse.
For more on this severe weather threat, let's check in with your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. It is already an active morning. You just heard Jesse talking about the threats throughout the day, but we've got plenty of alerts, specifically severe alerts, already up this morning. So let's start with some of those. Notice the tornado watch that's centered across parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. This has been ongoing all morning long as this line continues to work its way to the east. It's been pretty robust. So no surprise that we also have plenty of severe thunderstorm warnings and a couple of tornado warnings that are focused across parts of southern and eastern Oklahoma. Now, those are going to last throughout the morning. And again, more of these are going to start to populate and pop up here as we get through the morning hours and eventually into the afternoon hours. This specific watch goes through 11 a.m. Central Time. So we've got plenty of time left on this, and the ingredients are all there. Those aren't the only alerts. We'll get back to the severe weather threat here in a moment, but let's take a broad picture of all the alerts that we have in play. Winter alerts up to 60 16 million people. There is a snow component to this on the cold side of this system. So, of course, with the potential for also really gusty winds, we have the blizzard conditions that could be possible for folks in parts of the upper Midwest and northern plains. There's the wind alerts. They are quite expansive, stretching from the southeast across parts of the south and up into the central plains and parts of the Midwest. Those are going to stay with us through today, and we could see some really impressive wind gusts. On top of that, we've also got fire alerts. Those are centered across parts of Texas and New Mexico. This is where we could see the potential for fires to start and spread quickly. We've got really dry vegetation, and we've got those strong winds. So no surprise, again, all the ingredients are there for that. But here's the severe threat. 27 million people included in this. It goes from the Gulf Coast up to Memphis, includes Dallas, Shreveport, Jackson, Montgomery. I mean, we've got a lot of major cities included in this today. And it goes into the afternoon hours as well. We mentioned New Orleans is one of those spots that's going to have to watch for the potential for this. And it's all part of this big, broad winter system. We've got the snow and windy conditions across the plains in the Midwest and that tornado threat from Texas to the Florida Panhandle today. Now, the biggest threat is going to be the wind gusts up to 75 miles per hour. But the strong tornadoes are definitely on the table, too. And we could see a couple of those here, specifically across that area that includes New Orleans, Jackson, and Shreveport as we get through the afternoon hours today and as that system continues working to the east. Tomorrow, a lot of this shifts farther to the east, and that means the East Coast gets in on this action, and that's Florida to Pennsylvania that will watch for the potential for severe storms. Not quite as potent as what it'll be today for severe weather, but still, there's going to be a slew of impacts from this system across the East Coast for tomorrow, including, again, that threat for some tornadoes and some strong winds up to 75 miles per hour, this time focused across parts of the Carolinas, but stretching down through the southeast and including the mid-Atlantic, too. We'll see that tornado risk once again, though, so we'll keep that in mind for tomorrow. The snowfall, this is going to be difficult for travel because we've got those really strong winds and we've got potential for, up to a foot of snow in some of these spots. Upper Peninsula of Michigan, parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, that's where we'll see that heaviest snowfall, so heads up there. And the winds. I mean, guys, it's going to be a gusty one across parts of the South and stretching up to the Great Lakes, the Midwest, all of that included. And that's just one of the multiple impacts from this storm system.
A lot to keep an eye on, Angie. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Angie.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.